Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Cabinet. Can I start with the usual housekeeping arrangements? Firstly, the fire evacuation proceedings. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in War Memorial Park. Could I remind you that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet and also for future reference, and therefore anything which you may say as a speaker will be recorded for those purposes. Could I also ask everybody, if they would, to either turn off their mobile phones or to switch them to silent. But if you switch them to silent, can you make sure you don't leave them on the table, because the vibration is extremely annoying when it happens. Right. Apologies for absence. We have none. Declarations of interest. Anybody aware of any declarations of interest? Nope. Nope. So we have none. Minutes of the meeting of the 27th of October, which are attached to the agenda. Any points of correction on those minutes, or are we happy with them as they are written, in which case I will sign them in due course after the meeting, assuming that I have got a set, which I have here, to sign. Petitions, we have none. Urgent items, we have none of those either. So we move to item 6, referrals from Council, and the first of which was the referral on the refugee crisis, a motion moved by Councillor James and seconded by Councillor Parker. Deputy Leader, would you like to take that?
Thank you, Leader. I think just to go through the actual points in the motions, so if we go to Council resolves, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4 points. The first was to request Cabinet works with colleagues at HCC. Yes, that's absolutely happening. Plenty of emails to that effect. We have made an offer that we could accommodate a household, providing that over 55's accommodation was suitable, and that's something we can do now. We don't have any spare capacity at all which would accommodate families at the moment, but we have made that offer, and that's currently being processed, and we're working very closely with HCC and obviously with the Home Office, etc., and other partners to expedite that. Item 2 on there, which is to establish working with community groups, faith groups and churches. Again, we're undertaking that, we're talking to them, and it's something I'll be raising at BASP this week as well, to see whether an offer for a family could perhaps come through that route, because I believe that's happening in Winchester. So we'll see how that one goes and explore that further. Designate a specialist refugee officer to lead these efforts. This is all being led by Kate Randall from Housing, who's our Senior Housing Manager. And then the last point, write to the Prime Minister, and I think this was for the Leader to undertake, but I think at the moment we're still waiting for some kind of end result on the offer that we've made and the processes we're going through before that letter goes out. So I think that's kind of where we are at the moment.
Yes, thank you. The situation has been changing on a fairly daily basis in terms of what we've been able to offer, and it didn't seem appropriate to write until we had some clarity in the situation. But that I think I'm now in a position to do, and will do so at the beginning of next week, as I shan't be here for the rest of the week. So that's the only reason. Right, then move on to item 6.2, which is the recommendation, or rather the council motion on parks, open spaces and playing fields. Councillor Raffel?
Well, I thought there were going to be some speakers who want to speak on this.
Oh, sorry. Looking down my list, and I got carried away by the other bits and pieces. I have 2 speakers on this, Councillor Parker and Councillor James. You may Councillor Parker, do you wish to come forward first? I don't mind, whichever if you choose to come, but...
On the basis of seniority, only by age.
There has to be some advantage to age, I think, I hope. Right, you have 4 minutes, as you're aware.
Thank you. Good evening, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet members. I'm very pleased to have yet another opportunity of being here yet again, fighting to save old common land from future development for a football stadium. Some history. In the report to Cabinet on the 28th of July 2015, prepared for the portfolio holder by the Head of Community Services, Head of Resources, it is recorded that in March 2015, Cabinet resolved to undertake a review of land in the council ownership. The purpose of the review being to establish whether any land is available and appropriate as a potential location for a stadium to accommodate Basingstoke Town Football Club. Decision 29/2015 refers. This crucially impacted on the earlier proposed two-stage protection process, devised, I believe, as a means to frustrate the objections raised by residents, Councillor James and myself, against the clear intention to omit the old common land from the proposed protection of parks, open spaces and playing fields policy. However, within the same paragraph of the report to Cabinet in July 2015, a fundamental point was made by the officer, that being, therefore, if the proposed assessment criteria were adopted, these sites, that is, any suitably sized green open space capable of accommodating a football stadium, would remain unprotected unless or until a decision had been taken to proceed with a football stadium development at a specific site. The report continues. At this point, the list of protected sites would need to be revised to include all those sites disregarded as a possible site for a football stadium. Tonight, I thank the Cabinet Member for Planning, Councillor Raphael, for withdrawing at the last minute from the Council agenda the Cabinet decision to progress the protection proposals and referring it back to Cabinet. I would urge Cabinet not to make any further attempt to rush this proposed protection of parks, open spaces and playing fields through Council until Councillor Isaac and his officer team conclude their work on the all sites review and report back the outcome of that review and a recommendation to the overview committee for comment, then to Cabinet and subsequently to full Council, which is how this issue ought to have been handled in the first instance.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor James. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman. I put myself down to speak. I knew Councillor Parker was speaking, and bear in mind his age, there's always a chance he'd forget something. As it happens, he didn't. So if you just watch the webcast of what Councillor Parker said and listen to it twice, then I'm satisfied you don't need to hear the same thing from me.
I congratulate you on probably the briefest speech you've ever made. Right, Councillor Raphael.
Leader, thank you. As said at full council, there are a number of reasons why this decision needed to be reconsidered. I am in the process of reconsidering it. There's nothing further going to happen tonight. It's going to be reconsidered. And as has been said by Councillor Parker, one of the major issues that needs to be resolved is what Councillor Isaac may be telling the council as a result of his further considerations on the football club. And until that is done, I don't propose to trouble this Cabinet with this particular motion again.
Thank you very much. So I think that gives you the answer that you were seeking. So we move on then to item 7, funding for the existing satisfactory property investment. Paper B, Deputy Leader. No, there's no... Oh, yes, there is. We have Councillor Parker to speak on it, but perhaps you'd like to introduce the paper while he is... Well, actually, would you like to just pause for a minute while our residents leave? And then I will ask Councillor Parker to come forward and assume the chair while you introduce it.
Thank you, Leader. Just to very quickly praise the report in front of everyone. The ESP scheme was begun a couple of years ago. Under the original arrangements with Sentinel, we were investing 35k, or 37 actually, k per property, and we received a proportional share of the uplift. Under that arrangement, 17 properties have been secured so far. There are another 5 in the pipeline for delivery for early next year. As it states in the report, quite clearly demonstrated the visible impact on bed and breakfast that this has had, this scheme over a couple of years. In fact, this year we have only so far had to house 1 family in bed and breakfast for a period of over 6 weeks, whereas it was 18 in 2013-14 and 12 in 2014-15. Also, obviously, as a result of that, our expenditure forecast has gone down considerably. We spent 114k on bed and breakfast costs last year. This year, the forecast is for 35k. On the current forecast, we're likely to have had to house 7 families in bed and breakfast by the end of the year, as opposed to 15 last year and 12 in 2013-14. So the numbers clearly going in the right direction, although any family housed in bed and breakfast is unfortunate, and we would want to avoid that. And this has to be seen in a couple of contexts. The demand on services is still increasing. Again, you have a table there. The estimate for homeless acceptances this year is 56, 54 last year, and 23 in the previous year. And then we know there are still pressures on the private rental sector. And at the moment, we're still running at lower than projected levels of affordable housing delivery in new developments as well. And the new configuration of the Joshua Tree is dependent upon accessible temporary accommodation, and the ESP scheme delivers that. So the recommendation in the report is to secure 250k for a further 5 properties for 15-16 and a further 1 million grant funding for 16-17, which would bring in an additional 16 properties. Sentinel have confirmed a new offer. Their business models have changed recently, so they have changed the offer that they made to us previously. So the arrangement with them now would be 50k per property, and capital would be repaid in 10 years, and the uplift is half proportion of any capital uplift in the property. So if, for example, a house, a 50k investment increases in price by 30%, we would receive 15% payback. So that would be 57,500 at the end of 10 years. But in addition to that, of course, the main win for this is the reduction in bed and breakfast. That's obviously something we want to achieve on behalf of our residents. Enables us to reduce the placement of families into bed and breakfast and all the consequent disadvantages that go with that, and also enables us to save on expenditure on bed and breakfast while still meeting our statutory homeless duties and avoiding breaches of the 6-week rule as well for bed and breakfast days. So I'd like to thank our officers for all the immense hard work they've put into this, and the innovative thinking that goes into this, which is what we clearly need at the moment. Also like to thank our partners Sentinel for continuing with this work and continuing with us and demonstrating their commitment to helping us to help those families and households that we have that find themselves in housing difficulty.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parker.
Thank you again, Leader. I want to say right from the outset that I'm here speaking to this paper in complete support of it. The portfolio holder is to be congratulated yet again in the managing to develop this scheme, and I think also Kate Randall and her supporting officers would also need to have a very big pat on the back. This is a positive story, albeit developed from sad situations, no doubt, for the individual families. Having said that, my support is with it, and I would like just to draw reference to a couple of items that cause me a little bit of concern. On the 10-year repayment forecast, and I'm not going into any specifics, and I'd be very happy to take this up separate as a conversation outside of here, there is the suggestion of the 30% increase in property prices, and then giving a forecast of the council's return after 10 years on the 50% split. I think in terms of, this is my, I guess, my audit and accounts hat on, I couldn't find it in the report, and I appreciate possibly at sort of 1:30 in the morning I might have just missed it. There should perhaps be some suggestion that if the positive property price increases were not achieved, what position the council would be at year 10 in regard to payback or not payback. I would hope that, as is referenced in the report, the sort of difficulties we experience with the private housing sector, that we don't have to resort to developing any scheme with that particular form of housing provision, because I don't think necessarily compassion and social themes are high up in their priorities. I would have liked, really, possibly, the portfolio holder did make comment, I would have also perhaps liked the a bit more prominence in the report to the positive result this scheme is achieving for those vulnerable members of our borough who've fallen on hard times. But that said, I do congratulate you and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Deputy, do you want to respond? I'm sure you would, following those glowing accolades.
Yes, of course. I'd like to thank Councillor Parker for his continuing support on the homeless work that's going on here. And I'm sure that officers will be very, very happy to hear that again. And I'll make sure they're aware tomorrow of your comments. I take your point about the potential lack of uplift if it isn't as projected. I suppose my only comment would be that with this scheme, there's twofold. I mean, the main reason, the main driver for it, obviously, is to reduce bed and breakfast, and it's working as such in that. But clearly, if there's some kind of investment in there as well for the council, then that's excellent, and that's something we want to achieve. And I suppose any investment in property is subject to that kind of caveat. I'm not sure, as you say, there is a particular reference within the report to the fact that that may happen, but I think that's a given, understanding that could happen. But other than that, thank you very much for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the scheme was thoroughly looked at by Mr. Jacquist, who is not known for his optimism when it comes to future trends, and I won't embarrass him by asking him to comment on that at this stage, probably because he's not listening to me anyway. But I think if you wish to take it up outside, I'm sure he'd be happy to give you comfort on that aspect of it. So, members, we're happy to endorse this. I think it's a very good thing. If we could, we would spend more, but it's difficult to get the housing. There's a limit to what you can actually do in the course of a year. Good. So I'm assuming that is silent positive nodding there. Thank you very much. Then let us move on to the next item, which is the local infrastructure fund application proposals for funding, particularly which refers, I think, to Popley East and Popley West. Paper C. Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Leader. This report is an application for local infrastructure funding referencing Popley East and Popley West for a total of 618,000 over two particular sites. The Melrose Community Centre, 343,000 to build an extension and to carry out reconfiguration, and secondly, St Gabriel's Church, 275,000 to build a flat roof extension and enhance the facilities currently there. Both these proposals have been brought forward by the community and are linked to organisations which are heavily utilised and currently struggling to fulfil their obligations within the community, so will help greatly to enhance the community life in Popley. They're fully supported by the ward members and have been brought forward, as I said, by the community. And the officers, and looking at it, looked at long term in terms of the planning of these, and are quite satisfied they meet all the lift restraints that have been put forward as part of delivery of these particular grants. So I basically commend the two applications to Cabinet and hope that we can pass them through and enable them to go ahead.
Thank you. Any comments, anybody? If not, I think probably we're fully behind it and approved. Good. Treasury Management and Mid-Year Report. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this report is a 6-month update on our the money that we have invested in the market. We're forecasting net interest income of 3.15 million to the end of this financial year, which is £350,000 less than we originally estimated. And that shortfall we met by a contribution from the interest rate risk reserve. The reason for the undershoot here is that interest rates across the globe have not moved as was forecast by many commentators at the time the budget was put together. The Bank of England has held bank rate at 0.5%. There's been slowing of growth in China, and the expected increase in rates by the leading economy, the US, has not taken place. Also, investment in the external funds that we've moved into, the DCFs, did not take place as quickly as we had hoped, because it became necessary to change the fund manager that we were going to use. The performance of the externally managed funds has been lower than their own targets, but one has to take a long-term view on these funds, and they are still returning 2.27%, which is better than the overall average returns. So one significant event to mention in this period is that further investment that's taken place in a DCF of £10 million, which was part of the agreed strategy. There is no decision required here. This is a report for noting.
Well, it is actually, we are required to make a decision that we will recommend the council to note the report. So I suppose it is a decision as or to make a recommendation as such. It is not a decision notice subject. It is a subject of within the minutes which gets referred on for those anoraks who wish to know the ins and outs of this particular area. So I think you've covered it fully, and we're happy to note this and recommend that full council note it. Yeah, good. Then let us go back to the agenda, which is on to item 8. No, it's not. It's item 10, sorry. Which is fees and charges, which again is Councillor Isaac, but we'd like to introduce it, and then I have two speakers. First of all, Councillor James, and then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. Every year it's a requirement that we review our fees and charges, and this year we are proposing to increase the fees and charges overall in line with budget strategy at 1%. Particularly pleased that it's been possible to increase free parking from half an hour to an hour in the short stay car parking, and also to freeze the charges for the 30-minute and 1 hour periods in the long stay, and no increase in evening and Sunday tariffs. At scrutiny committee recently, the point was raised about whether the increase to 1 hour could be extended to Sundays, and I think having reviewed this with the officers, this is something that I think we should do, so I'd recommend that variation to Cabinet. I think it's a very good outcome that this council is in a position to do more to help shoppers and also our shopkeepers, our retailers, at a time when the retail industry does have its challenges, but I think the overall picture of the shopping offer in Basingstoke is looking ever brighter with the arrival of John Lewis and Waitrose. So I think this is just another endorsement of our support for shoppers and retailers in the borough, and puts us at odds and in a much better place than a lot of other towns in the southeast and generally across the country. So I'm pleased to recommend this report to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. And it's very much on the topic of parking fees and charges. I certainly welcomed the 30-minute parking when it arrived, and thought it was adding value, would encourage people to change their shopping habits, and rather than rule out going to town, would nip into town to do those jobs otherwise they may have done elsewhere. Extend it to an hour makes absolute sense if you consider some tasks in the town just can't be done in 30 minutes. But what I really want to understand, and I don't from the fees and charges paper, and I didn't see enough evidence there, it may be there, someone could point me to it, is whether or not it has a positive impact we wanted it to have. Because obviously the other charges are increasing slightly. As someone who's a big fan of the town centre, I live in it, I work in it, and I visit every day, I want people to explore, particularly the top of town, which people often talk down the top of town and say it's rubbish and this shop's empty, and it's actually not true. There's not very many empty shops. Some of the shops are very exciting, but they're hidden down dark alleys and you have to go and look for them. There are hidden treasures there, and I want people to explore and benefit the whole of the shopping centre, top of town, the Mals, Festival Place, and stay longer. And I need to understand whether or not by creating an hour free parking, we're attracting new people that otherwise wouldn't have used the town, or whether we're starting to encourage more people to do what I call man shopping, where you want a pair of shoes, you go into town, you go to the shoe shop, you buy your shoes, you go home, rather than exploring shopping. Obviously, in an ideal world, what we want is people to go to town, unless it's my other half and I'm with her, go to town, explore, and stay, go to several shops, have a cup of coffee, visit a restaurant, walk around town a bit further and stay for more hours. And I'm hoping, by mentioning this now at the fees and charges stage, that we look to the next resident survey or find some way of capturing how the free parking is impacting on people's shopping habits. Is it having the desired effect of making people come to town who otherwise wouldn't have come to town? Or is it making people start coming into town, benefiting from the free parking, and restricting their visit to just going to the shops they were going to go to and not exploring and spending more? So is it having the positive economic benefits? I don't think we can truly understand now, and I don't know how we do it financially effectively, because surveys cost a lot of money. But I'd just like us to explore at some point for future years to really understand, is it having the positive impact we want it to have, or are we putting people off dwelling in the town and exploring and spending more money on the local economy and local businesses?
Thank you very much. We'll come back to that in a minute. Once you've had your second speaker. How could you forget? Councillor Harvey. Good evening. You have your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Leader. Really welcome the Sunday parking element and the response to scrutiny, and thank you for that. I think that's an important move, and totally agree with what the previous speaker said in terms of the way we'd like to see that generate footfall, and the way hopefully it can benefit small businesses and the independent retailers as much as the big ones in the town centre as well. A couple of other points I'd like to raise really, and where the group do disagree, I think, with some of the proposals in here, in particular the bulky waste increase. I don't think that's justified, and we have a real problem with that because of the impact that we're seeing. To have gone over the period from a £10 charge to what's now £27.50 as a baseline charge, that's a 175% increase your administration has overseen of the bulky waste. That's significant, and there are a lot of people who do struggle to pay that, even if they don't fall into the categories of exemption. And I do think there is an issue with fly tipping, and the council's own figures point to a 23% increase in fly tipping over the last 2 years. Now, that is a concern. We are seeing it prevalent, and it does need to be addressed. And surely simply increasing the bulky waste bulky waste charges in this way isn't addressing the overlapping issue of the consequences of that for fly tipping, and we want to see that addressed. In terms of the rat issues that are highlighted at scrutiny, I do think they're worth mentioning here as well. I appreciate what the Cabinet member said at the scrutiny meeting in terms of the reasoning behind this, but we do disagree. And I think the fact that in the last year the number of people using the service has increased as much as it has, and the issues that we've noted in the town and have been raised as casework amongst members in the town relating to the number of rat increases we've seen, the idea of limiting rat treatments in the way that's proposed isn't the most sensible way forward. And finally, car parking. I think there are a number of issues around car parking in the report that really do need challenging. This constant increase on the wider car parking charges, the longer charges that go over season tickets and so on, up to 10% on average. I mean, 10%, that's nowhere near inflation. It's nowhere near inflation. You're salting the commuter, to put it bluntly. And that is an issue, because the commuter is then coming out onto our residential streets. And the issues that highways officers are helping us and trying to help us deal with, and it's not just my own ward, but all of the wards in the town centre, are becoming significant issues for many, many residents who see commuters taking up their car parking spaces because the commuters choose not to use our car parks because they're simply too expensive. And again, it's an issue we have to address because it's causing a real quality of life issue for many other residents in our town. And it's not fair to the commuter, it's not fair to them as residents, and it's something the council needs to address. But I would also say that the highways officers are doing the very best they can do in a very difficult circumstance. But it isn't helped when you put car parking charges up by on average 10%, way above inflation. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. I think what I shall do is ask the relevant portfolio holders to deal with the specific issues, and then we can come back to the commuter parking and those charges for you, Councillor Risers, at the end, since we don't actually have a portfolio holder for commuters as such. So can we just start with this impact on free parking on the activity in the town centre? Councillor Mrs Reid.
Yes. Right. Thank you, Leader. Yes, first of all, we do have some evidence, but it's primarily anecdotal. Traders certainly wanted the half-hour free parking, and they've been saying that that's been working, and therefore they've asked for the hour, and very, very happy to have that. And if I could just, Leader, just actually put in a little bit of a plug at this moment, but then I'll come back to Councillor James's points. But we have the Christmas event at the top of town on Friday. Lots of exciting Christmassy festive things going on, including the lighting of the Christmas tree. So we have a Christmas tree in Marketplace for the first time in a very long time, I believe, and various other activities and carol singing and I think a snow machine and so on. And there is free parking for that from midday on Friday, and that runs all the way through Friday, and then again on Saturday for Small Business Saturday as well, to encourage people to come in and visit those shops. As Councillor James says, we have some fantastic little shops at the top of town, and we want to get people in there. So that's running Friday and Saturday. To go back to your points now. As I say, we have that anecdotal evidence. We also have surveys that we've run during events which have measured the impact of the events on footfall, and we do regular footfall checks as well. But I think what you've said is actually really interesting in terms of actually trying to drill into that and working out why people are coming in. Are they staying longer, where they're shopping? And I'm very happy to take that forward and have a look at that and see if there's a way we can do that, which hopefully isn't too expensive. So I'm very happy to take that on and have a look at it and do slightly more detailed survey, perhaps, if we can.
Thank you very much. I think it's just worth reminding ourselves that it's not all car parks that are free for the first hour. It is only basically the town centre ones, including Central Car Park, obviously enough, but it excludes the Mal's Car Park, Allenson Link Car Park, and clearly it excludes Festival Place as well. So we just need to be a point on that. Did you wish to make a point on car parking or something else? Car parking, yeah.
Yeah, Leader, I noticed that Councillor Gavin James wanted to encourage explorative non-mail shopping. I have to say that I'm sure that's a great thing, provided you're not paying for it. Can I say that I hope that it's noted that one of the beneficiaries of the hour-free proposal for parking on Sundays will possibly be those who choose not to worship Mammon on a Sunday morning, and of course it's probably a lot harder to measure their footfall, and so if the footfall isn't measured as noticeable, it's maybe because they're going somewhere else.
Well, all I can say is if it's remind you it is limited to an hour, so if that encourages shorter sermons, it can only be a very positive benefit. Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of comments on the parking. Firstly, one of the benefits of now going to ticketing for 1 hour, it means that we can now begin an analysis of actually the number of people who are particularly using the car park at any particular time, and that's the reason why the ticketing is required now for the free 1 hour. Last year, I believe 137,000 parking spaces were free, and that's about 25% of the total car park usage within the council last year, so it has a big effect. And that baseline then allows us to measure further forward how that increases and how it develops. The second thing is you mentioned the fact that the charge increase is overall a 1% in line with the 1% budget. There are variations within that, that is true, that some of the mid to longer term do have an increase of slightly more than up to 10%. However, the net result of all those is still that the parking in Basingstoke is the most competitive in the area. And in terms of those people commuting, you will find that the long-term car park that is Basingstoke and Dean is cheaper than that run by Network Rail. So it is fair to say that even with the increases, we are the most competitive, not just in Basingstoke, but within the local area as well. So whilst we should always be careful to ensure that we maintain that competitiveness, I don't think I can quite take your point that we're completely bearing down on commuters and completely bearing down on people who want to stay longer. It is the objective of the council to encourage people to live here, and parking is very important within that, and we recognise that.
Thank you. So we'll now move across to the large increase in cost of bulky waste, and the fact that it's increased had a result in increase in the amount of fly tipping. Councillor Aegis.
Thank you, Leader. Firstly, bulky waste, yes, we do offer that service. We don't have to as a council, but we do and we want to. The whole point of this charging structure is to encourage residents to do other things, such as it says in the paper, to encourage residents to follow the waste prevention line of reduce, reuse and recycle. Bulky waste is, and I said this at scrutiny, is our only part of our waste that goes to landfill, and that is not good. So we are working with charities. The officers are working very hard to work with charities and with people locally to try and divert the bulky waste away from it being collected from us as a borough and go to charities. Yes, there is an increase of 10%, as is clear in the paper, but those on low income do get a concession of 50%. So I think it was said at scrutiny, and it was said tonight, 5 years ago it cost £10. Well, on a low income with the concession, it will now cost £2.50. So that's an increase of £2.50 over 5 years. So, and still for 4 items that you're having collected, if the charges go ahead, it's only £30. And we are trying to increase recycling, especially in this area, more so than anything else, because this goes to landfill, and working with the charities. In relation to fly tipping, Councillor Harvey said there's been a 23% increase in fly tipping in the borough. When the Labour group made a freedom of information request in respect of fly tipping, the way it was worded, it asked for the amount of reports, so that actually did show an increase, because that could be that 10 people are reporting the same incident. The official figures show that although nationally fly tipping's gone up by some 20, I think it's about 20-23%. In Basingstoke and Dean, fly tipping has decreased by 18%. And I can get you the figures, I can send them. I've had the environmental health team do it. I've had comms do a report for me after the Gazette said that it'd gone up. What the Gazette were reporting was national figures. Bulky waste charges have gone up year on year in this borough, and fly tipping has not gone up year on year. And I can send the figures round to all members to stop this view that fly tipping in this borough has gone up. So I do suggest to Cabinet that the increase in bulky waste charges are, well, they're needed. We're running it in a loss, and I know that might only be £7,000, but that's to just increase and increase and increase. We need this service to break even, and we need to encourage residents to actually recycle this waste or get rid of it somehow else without having to send it off to landfill, because that's my biggest concern.
So just whilst everywhere else fly tipping's gone up, it's gone down by 18% within the borough and not up by 23%. That was just the number of reports which went up. Okay, it's always good to get figures accurate. Councillor Isaac, do you want to sum up then? I think your thunder has been stolen, if you ever had any, on commuter parking, but
we shall never know. But no, I think my colleagues have covered things very well indeed. All I'd say is that it's good that as far as our shop units in the malls are concerned, they're all let. I think one under offer. Is that right, Kevin? At the moment? So we've got they're all full or about to be let. As a man shopper, I would expect that that would make me explore, and I might then become an exploring shopper in by your standard, Councillor James, and I would start paying after an hour for parking. As far as the general rates for car parking are concerned, as Cabinet colleagues have said, council parking remains very competitive, both in relation to private car parking operators and in England or South East generally. I suppose that there are always going to be people who don't want to pay for car parking at all, and so in that sense, that category will always be looking for an opportunity to park without having to pay for it. But generally speaking, I think we've got the balance right here. Overall, it's a 1% increase in our fees and charges, and when other boroughs are increasing their fees and charges dramatically, I think it's again testimony to our very strong financial controls.
Thank you very much. I think we've invented a new sport for Basingstoke this evening, exploratory shopping. And no doubt there'll then be extreme exploratory shopping and all sorts of other kinds of exploratory shopping to follow on from it. Personally, the only thing I ever explore is the inside of the nearest coffee shop or pub if I'm lucky. So, are we happy? This report, if agreed, will now go forward to be included within the budget report in February. We're all agreed? Happy? Good. Thank you very much. So, let me get back to find the agenda at the beginning here and see where we go next. The revenue and capital budget forecast is at the 30th of September, please, Councillor Isaacs.
Yes, again, this is a 6-month snapshot of where our revenue and capital budget is. In terms of revenue, our net expenditure is forecast to be £838,000 under budget by end of the year. This is largely explained by net savings of £262,000, largely accounted for by staff vacancies, and a spike in income of £576,000 as a result of both property rents and planning applications. It's also, as I say, addresses our capital budget. It's forecast that the expenditure will be £7.89 million, which is £1.759 million less than budgeted, and this is largely accounted for by the rephasing of road improvement works by Hampshire County Council. So our contribution is going to be required later outside this financial year. There's also been an underspend on the low carbon loan scheme, which I know that my colleague Councillor Eaches is working hard at in terms of promoting it to communities and residents who in terms of the opportunities for home energy improvements. There's been also an overspend of £468,000 on disabled facilities grants. Again, this is due to unexpected high demand and increasing costs, but it's good that we as a council are able to meet that important expenditure. We are acting quickly in relation to these forecast additional revenues, and we are proposing to spend £50,000 on grants to the local EU Rural Business Grant grants programme, £250,000 to the purchase of ESPs, as my colleague Councillor Reid has said. In 2015, that's 5 new properties, and £200,000 to go on the Basingview revenue reserve to help with the marketing and the maintenance proposals for Basing View. £338,000 contribution to the funding of increased costs for disabled facilities grants, and £350,000 to be transferred to the interest risk reserve to cover the interest shortfall that I spoke about earlier. So I hope that Cabinet will endorse this report.
Thank you very much. I must say it's pleasant to see that a large part of this variations or variance is due to an increase in income, which is a very positive fact. For how long that's sustainable, I think we have to be somewhat cautious for future years. But in the meantime, it's very good that we're able to take it while it's there and to use it for such purposes of the scheme which we were discussing earlier on to deal with homelessness. So, everybody happy with the report? Yep. And particularly to agree the use of the £500,000 as forecast. Yeah, good. Okay, then we move to the last item on the agenda this evening, which is an extension of the exclusivity agreement for the development or redevelopment of Basingstoke Leisure Park. Now, strangely, I have 3 speakers on this subject. The first of which is Councillor Parker. Councillor Isaac, do you want to just briefly explain why this is a necessary step in this process?
Yes, thank you, Leader. This report seeks Cabinet approval to extend the exclusivity agreement with the preferred developer partner, New River Retail, for the potential redevelopment of the Basingstoke Leisure Park for a further 6 months, taking that exclusivity agreement through to 1st of July 2016. The reason for that is that the outline development plans in relation to the proposals for the regeneration of the leisure park have not advanced to a stage where we could rely on the existing exclusivity agreement, which expires on the 1st of January 2016. So by extending it, we're not in any way committing the council to the leisure park redevelopment or appointing the development partner at this stage. But it enables us to continue to continue the work of looking at the proposals for the leisure park, so that's all I need to say at this point, I think.
Thank you then, Councillor Parker.
Thank you again, Chair. Cabinet members. February 2015, Cabinet approved granting exclusivity agreement to NRR, which commenced on the 2nd of February 2015. Then the Executive Director of Finance and Resources and the Head of Law and Governance used their discretion to allow an extension of the agreement by a further 3 months. The report gives no mention of portfolio holder endorsement to this, but I also do note from my reading of the paper that this was a provision within the wording of the original agreement. And now we are being asked to accept another extension for a further 6 months. But an all-member presentation on their proposals is not happening until a couple of weeks' time. I note New River Retail have drawn up proposals which are outlined in general terms in para 4.5 of the report. So why were they not able to present their ideas to members, either before they sought 3 months extension or any time between it being granted and before this evening's meeting? This is a poor way to conduct business and does not give me much confidence in such an organisation. I also note, however, they have not wasted any time or commitment in persuading officers that they would require a 250-year lease of the entire park. And if agreeing such a long-term lease is part of the recommendation, then I will guarantee I certainly oppose it now and will continue to oppose it.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Councillor Keating, who sat very patiently through the whole evening. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Cabinet.
Your 4 minutes starts now.
I am here as a ward councillor whereby the leisure park is in our ward. We have 3 councillors, and none of the 3 councillors have been updated, reviewed, or given any information other than the publicly available documents to the Cabinet. Now we believe, along with Councillor Parker, that the arrangements so far are totally negative in terms of their impact on councillors. You tell the councillors that we have an exclusive agreement for 6 months, then you tell them that we're going to that we have extended the exclusive agreement for an additional 3 months, and now you're telling councillors that you want another 6 months without telling the councillors what's going on. The councillors, including the ward councillors, are proposed to be told what's going on the 15th of December, 2 weeks after your decision. Now, that is no way to run a business whereby democracy is supposed to be a key factor. And I can tell you, I believe that if this proposed development and its extension thereof was in any other ward with Tory councillors, they would not have been treated as badly as we have been treated. I can also tell you that it is appalling to say to councillors, we'll tell you what we're doing after we as a Cabinet have decided. It is shoddy, it's disgraceful, and it is not worthy of a Cabinet decision like you're proposing tonight. I suggest you delay the Cabinet until after members have been told. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Harvey. Four minutes.
Thank you, Leader. Since the MAP meeting in the summer, where New River Retail were the only ones presenting, we've been looking at the relationships involved in this, some interesting relationships, and Montague Evans have done a good job in finding New River Retail, and it's interesting to read the relationship between Montague Evans and New River Retail as you explore the various other things that the two of them are working on. And we started asking the question, who are New River Retail? Well, their own website confirms them as being a retail operator. They say themselves that New River Retail is a leading property investor, asset manager and developer specialising in the UK retail sector. They talk about owning shopping centres, retail warehouses, high street assets and pubs, but there is no mention of leisure. The website goes on about their investment strategy focused on delivering their returns for their shareholders on retail experiences for our retailers and consumers. They have a 5-fold strategy, they say, to deliver on this commitment through retail specialisation. Now, to us, no mention of leisure at all in those descriptions and those elements of what they're about as a business. Now, to us, it makes little sense to bring in a retail specialist to regenerate a leisure park unless you or they are preferring it to have a significant retail element. Now, there are reasons, important reasons to consider why we should not have another out-of-town retail outlet. We're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds to make our town centre more attractive, and we should not seek to undermine it with an out-of-town retail centre. We've already got plenty of those in terms of Chinham and Brighton Hill, and we know from our planning retail studies where there is clear evidence that any other out-of-town retail centre would seriously damage the town centre and those other important local district centres. It's also interesting to note that New River Retail allegedly contributed almost £12,000 to Conservatives in Hampshire less than 12 months ago. We don't need to put the town centre at risk if you are intending to pursue a retail element of this proposal. And we just don't know, do we? Every day that the exclusivity agreement is extended is another day when nobody else has the opportunity to come forward. Nobody else has the opportunity to present or to go to the market to see if there are other people out there who would be interested. And it puts us in a weaker negotiating position the longer it goes on, because New River Retail are at the moment, and will continue to be for this period, the continuing only show in town. The exclusivity agreement would start again in January 2016. You're talking about taking proposals to Cabinet in February 2016, talking about it coming to CEP in January 2016. It really begs the question whether or not the 6 months of this is actually appropriate in the context of where this thing is at. But as I say, looking at it and trying to examine it and to understand it, there are many, many questions that are being raised about who these people are and what their intentions may be based upon their business model and what they actually do in the country.
I'd like to keep this debate to the subject of the paper, which is the extension of the exclusivity agreement, and not to the question of what is in the proposals to come forward, or to the nature of Montague Evans, or the nature of New River Retail, all of which is, I think, very well publicly documented, and people trying to prejudge and take in advance positions without any information on the subject whatsoever, but for which there will be plenty of time to do that properly through the democratic process as we go on later on through the year. And I think any implication that there might have been by any of the speakers that we are in any way trying to avoid proper democratic scrutiny of this process would have been very unfortunate, and I'm sure they didn't mean to make that implication in any way. Now, I will let Councillor Isaac explain exactly where we are before we move forward.
Thank you, Leader. It's important here that we understand what is being proposed to be decided here. What we're proposing to do is not to make a decision about the future of the leisure park or the partners that we will be working with. It's a decision here to extend the exclusivity agreement. We're needing to do that because, as you can imagine, this is a very significant scheme, very complicated scheme, and officers have quite rightly advised us that they need time to completely look at some of the proposals that are emerging from New River on this. So we have taken the advice from officers, and that's why it's unfortunate. I think I would agree with you that the members' briefing has not taken place before it was necessary to extend the exclusivity agreement by a further 6 months. But I would reiterate the point: there is no decision made by virtue of extending this exclusivity agreement. We are going to have a members' briefing on the 15th of December, and I'm happy to have a meeting with ward councillors who I can understand wish to completely understand what it is that is being proposed here. So that isn't an issue at all. I think that this will, as the Leader says, receive the full democratic scrutiny in due course. It will be going to CEP in due course. It will be going to Cabinet and to full Council. So I'm quite clear that there's nothing that's lost here at all. You will understand fully what our proposals are in due course, or New River's proposals are in due course.
Thank you. This issue was explored at last night's group leaders meeting, fully explored. The points were very clearly made that it is unfortunate that it is coming in this sequence, but the reason for that is because some of the reports which were needed to make sure that any proposals which were going to be put forward and presented to members were sensible proposals, that they were practical proposals. Those reports were not ready until such time as we were able to arrange the meeting at a date which came after the Cabinet meeting. You can seek clarification, yeah.
Thank you very much, Leader. Understanding what Councillor Isaac has said in relation to what is being considered this evening, I refer to the recommendation on the paper, which quite clearly talks about detailed terms are delegated to the Executive Director of Finance and resources in consultation with the Head of Law and Governance. And within the report, there is a clear suggestion of a 250-year lease being requested. Now, if that's contained in this report, and all we're dealing with is an extension, why is that comment contained within this report? Is it a hidden thing that we need to be concerned about? I would like to accept on face value what the portfolio holder has said, but then when you look at the detail in the report, I'm concerned.
Councillor Parker, to answer your point. Firstly, as part of an exclusivity agreement arrangement, it's an opportunity for the two parties to do all the due diligence, so that if it reaches the point where we as a council decide that actually yes, we do want to proceed with these parties, we're in a position to do so. But it doesn't make any commitment that we will do so. And as to your point about granting a 250-year lease, that has always been contemplated. That's always been something that's been understood, that if you are going to bring on board a partner who's going to make the sort of significant investment we are looking for to regenerate the leisure park, then you're going to have to give that partner a suitably long interest in the leisure park. But you have to understand that we balance that by retaining the freehold ownership of the park for the council, so that we are there as a landlord, still able to make sure that that we exert the sufficient level of control over how the development takes place immediately and over the longer term. But if we don't provide that length of tenure to an investor, no decisions have been taken yet, but it's always been there as something that has been contemplated, as I say. Then we're not going to, we won't find we'll be able to get that sort of long-term investment partner that I think is necessary if we want to regenerate our leisure park.
Thank you, Councillor. I think just to get this trebly clear, in case there's any implication, this decision, which is proposed to be taken tonight, in no way grants a 250-year lease to anybody. It is very clear that what this exclusivity agreement does is to provide the time frame within which, if it is decided to proceed with the proposals that are being made by New River, then it allows the time for the detailed negotiation to take place on all the aspects of terms of the agreement, the way the development will be handled, and all the other details that would be necessary. And it's quite likely that if we do decide to move ahead, that 6 months may not be long enough to actually complete that, because you're into very, very heavy contractual terms in terms of negotiation at that stage. But at least it provides that breathing space to do it. All we are doing is, by extending the exclusivity agreement, is to provide that umbrella which enables us to progress what I would hope is going to be a very exciting and positive and encouraging proposal that will come forward, and something which the borough can take great pride in, and will be an enormous benefit to the borough, both in terms of the number of jobs it will create and the amount of money it will bring into our local economy. So before people start trying to take their positions in advance without knowing the facts. I would just ask everybody to be at least open-minded and preferably be positive and optimistic about what is going to be proposed, rather than trying to find means of sniping at it as we go through, unnecessarily sniping at something when it's not even yet full knowledge of what is being proposed. So, are we happy to extend this agreement? I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Good. So that, I think, concludes the meeting this evening. And since we are now in the month of December, I wish you all a very happy Christmas if you're not going to turn up between now and then.